I'm gonna let you in on... I forgot my mic. Anyway, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Up until pretty recently, I was what the kids call... what's the word? Oh, unemployed. Naturally, because of this, I was dirt poor. I mean, I couldn't even afford dirt. Aww. But I mean, I wasn't gonna let a bunch of dead presidents, or lack thereof, I guess, stop me from playing video games and getting that sweet, sweet dopamine rush that comes with it. Oh, fuck, wait, I needed those. Luckily though, my family orders enough stuff on Amazon every month to justify buying Amazon Prime, which also gives me... which, because of the invisible hand of capitalism, also gave me access to Twitch Prime. Twitch Prime is a service that gives you free and discounted in-game loot, in addition to a couple of free indie games each month, and I'm sure it has other perks that relate to the actual Twitch website, but because I don't watch live streams, I don't know. Because I don't have the time, attention span, or hard drive space to play all of the games that I've amassed over the last year, I'm just gonna go ahead and play a bunch of them and see which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones are incredibly decent. Just like Pulp Fiction or My Emotional Stability, there won't be any order or sorting process for the games I play. I'm literally just gonna close my eyes and play whatever game my mouse lands on. And by now, you're probably wondering, but how are we going to know if you're actually playing them randomly? Well, dread not, because the first game that I'm playing is called Treadnoughts. That sounded so much better in my head, please don't go away.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, breakdown, baby.
Treadnoughts is a neat little party game where you and your friends control tanks and blow each other up, or as I like to call it, the Iraq War on ice. But because I don't have any human friends to play with, I'm forced to play with the computers, which I've affectionately named Penny, Chip, and Used Napkin. The main form of movement in this game is by hopping in the air and shooting your cannon to launch yourself in the opposite direction, like a scallop using jet propulsion to escape a loan shark. Combine that with the ability to double jump and stick to walls and ceilings, and you've got a recipe. It's not a very tasty recipe, but it's a recipe for something, alright? In standard party game fashion, matches typically last between 10 to 30 seconds each, and if I were a mature person, I'd avoid making a sex joke right now. But because I'm not a mature person, I'm going to. But I'm not gonna tell you when. The art direction for this game is also pretty beautiful, and playing more matches unlocks more backgrounds to stare at after being crushed within a second of starting a match. This is definitely a game that needs to be played with friends, and it's probably more fun the more drunk everybody is. In conclusion, Treadnoughts gets an okay out of 10. It's okay. But you know what's better than okay?
Super hot.
Keep moving your body in my direction.
Super hot.
Is a first-person action game where you run around in a simulation,
inside a simulation of a simulation,
fighting digital degenerates with guns, sticks, and any combination of the two, but with a twist. You know how sometimes you forget to do the dishes and your mom busts into your room with a sandal in her hand, and the world moves in slow motion until that sandal makes contact with your cheek? Well,
Super hot.
achieves that effect, but only when you move.
Super hot.
Starts with your character playing a virtual reality action game, but HAL 2000 slowly takes over and everything goes to shit, and you have to figure out how to make it out in one piece. Oddly enough, since time only moves when you do,
Super hot.
becomes equal parts action and puzzle as you figure out how to dodge bullets and kill bad guys while looking as cool as possible. There's a healthy array of guns and melee weapons to use, and you can even cut and shoot other bullets in mid-air. I like to imagine that this is what using a Sharingan is like.
Super hot.
Gets a hardcore Henry out of 10. Speaking of running fast, and by extension, eating ass, Cluster Truck is a game about doing at least one of those things. I'll give you a hint, it's eating ass. Cluster Truck is a game about jumping from trucks onto other trucks at the same frequency as my brain jumping from existential crises to thinking about actual literal beetles. Screw all of those fancy control schemes, Cluster Truck doesn't need any of them. How do you play? Run, jump, land, don't fall off, don't get hit by a fucking truck. It's simple, it's effective, it's efficient, it's really frustrating. It is the very skeleton of a game. It's only what it needs to be, and it's fun. And oh my god, I sound like a boomer. Ew. Back in my day, we didn't have virtual reality. The only reality we had was running through traffic. Oh, wait. I have a better one. Remember Flash games? Yep. Those were the days. Lego Island? Now that's a game. They just don't make them like they used to. This is one of those games that you expect to get bored of after 10 minutes until you realize that your ass has fallen asleep and you see trucks when you close your eyes. And because of this godforsaken game, every time I see a box truck in public, I have an uncontrollable urge to climb on top of it and surf it over the next county line. When most people sleep, they dream of people that they love, or giving presentations and forgetting to put on pants. But not me. When I sleep, I dream of Isuzu elves and Ford Transit box trucks, as far as the eye can see. Now that I think about it, that's probably a side effect of playing too much City Skylines. Whoops! Anyway, Cluster Truck gets a Frogger out of 10. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the going fast spectrum, we have Manuel Samuel.
When your legs don't work like they used to before.
Manuel Samuel is a game that I play annually about Samuel, not Daniel, who controls his limbs manually. Unfortunately, Manuel Samuel comes with neither a manual nor a Cocker Spaniel. After Samuel gets brutally fucking murdered and speaks with death himself, he sells his soul in order to return to the world of the living, but he has to control all of his bodily functions manually for a whole day. This can range from a simple task like brushing teeth or putting on clothes, to something as complex as driving a car or de-escalating the Israel-Palestine conflict. If that sounds like it'd make for a pretty fun and interesting game, you'd be right. But you'd only be right for about 20 minutes. After those 20 minutes are up, this one-trick pony starts writhing around on the ground like a sad earthworm until you take it out behind the shed and uninstall it. Okay, I wrote in my script after that line, Sammy boy flopping around on the ground. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that. I don't know what that was referencing, but I wish I knew because it sounds like it would have been really funny.
Oh my god, what the fuck is that, bro?
There's an underlying subplot about Death wanting to be a skater, and he's always doing kickflips and shit in the background, but I think it was written by a dude who's seen a ripstick exactly once and was bitter that he got kicked out of Walmart for writing it inside. There's also a running joke where the characters say feces instead of shit, which is funny the first couple of dozen times until you realize that it's just a bazinga but worse. I really did try to like this game, but there are so many other games that take the premise of do this simple task but with wacky controls and do it much better. Case in point, I had more fun in the first 10 minutes of Octodad than I did in the first 2 hours of Manuel Samuel. So yeah, Manuel Samuel gets a quap out of 10. Honestly, just play quap. Framed is a game about a man running with a suitcase, which means that the only difference between this game and my relationship with my dad is that you actually know where the man with the suitcase is. Frame takes place entirely within comic book panels that you have to rearrange in order to help your character evade the cops. Where is he going? Don't worry about it. What's in the suitcase? You don't need to know. Who is he running from? Hey, I'm asking the questions here.
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
The whole aesthetic of this game is a 1930s detective noir setting with cool ass music to back it up, and within about an hour, my computer fan started to smell like cigarette smoke and all of my saliva was replaced with hard liquor. The first few levels start you off with just rearranging panels, and eventually you start rotating and reversing panels as well. And hell, I haven't beaten the game yet, but you can probably end up eating them at one point. This is one of those games that starts out difficult and only gets progressively harder, almost like the Fitnessgram Pacer test, and it sure does throw the old noggin for a joggin'. Apparently, this was actually a mobile game that got ported to PC, and I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but I definitely do hope that they got a raise. There are some points in the game where you just can't avoid interacting with the cops, and every time you knock one of them out, there's a cymbal crash or a jazz hit that totally fits with the aesthetic of the game. In conclusion, Framed gets a freeform jazz out of 10. Speaking of mobile games, Pumped BMX is another game that was ported from mobile to PC, but is it as good as Framed? No, absolutely not. It's a physics-based BMX game that stole its idea from Trials, its physics from Bad Rats, and its graphics from 12-ounce Mouse. Pumped BMX is a game about riding a bike and doing tricks on a downhill slope and trying to get as many points as possible. However, I use the word game very loosely here because it's less of an interactive art medium and more of a playable sanity test. The gameplay is incredibly simple, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but you know what else is incredibly simple? The chemical structure of carbon monoxide, with the difference here being that carbon monoxide at least gives you a high. Here's a picture of a bike. And here's a picture of some people jumping. If you look closely, you'll realize that both of these pictures have one thing in common. They both involve your legs. I think this game might have been created by Lieutenant Dan, because even though your character has a bike, which requires legs to operate, you can't use them. You just can't. Did you hit the ground right before the crest of a hill and need to pedal over it? Well, tough titties, bro. Guess you gotta restart the whole level. Need to jump off of a rail so you can land safely? That's unfortunate. I guess you should have thought about that before you started being bad at BMX riding. Need to pick up some speed so you can actually launch yourself off of a rail in the first place? Well, here's a better idea. Kill yourself. This is one of those games that requires you to strive for a perfect run, but unlike other games that do this, like Hotline Miami, this game is the equivalent of repeating the same math class until you get at least a C+. In most other games of literally any genre, the difficulty curve is pretty linear, but this game's idea of a difficulty curve starts at falling down in a bounce house and immediately switches to covering yourself in barbecue sauce and jumping into a tiger pit. I also found out that if you beat the game, there's a mode you can unlock that enables bugs and glitches, and it's really funny that they included it because I could have sworn that it was enabled as soon as I provided safe refuge for this disgusting waste of resources. Overall, this game gets a Fisher-Price plastic tricycle out of 10. I can honestly say that I've played Flash games that are much higher quality than this. Actually, if you're unfortunate enough to even think about buying this game, just play Cyclomaniacs instead. It's better in literally every way. There's 3 of them and they're all free. Well, I think that's about all the free games that I can handle for today. If you like the video, go ahead and subscribe. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some poverty to wallow in.